Is Donald Trump now kicking off the Bitcoin retail bull run with his decision? And things could get very interesting in the coming months. We'll take a look in this video at exactly what could happen and what makes this especially significant for Americans right now. Hey, welcome to Crypto Al. I think many of you have already heard about it. Donald Trump has once again announced a check for US citizens, and this time it's for $2,000. This time, these are supposed to be paid out as a dividend, not like the stimulus checks in 2020, which already had a huge impact. And now there are $2,000 for all low-income US citizens. And if we think back to 2020, that already had a huge impact, or rather it played a major role in causing Bitcoin to rise. Let's take a look at that in a moment. Let's dive back into the current market, and right now, as I mentioned, Bitcoin has dropped out of my old registration channel. Now I've drawn a new one, and at the moment it's running pretty much in the middle, at around $104,160. At the moment, yes, people are basically waiting for the Bitcoin reserve to come in for something a bit more concrete to happen. But even these $2,000 have already sparked a bit of euphoria in the market, because if you look at what happened in 2020, some really dramatic things took place. I also have the charts for this, and a lot of people are sitting on significant profits if they converted their stimulus check directly into Bitcoin back then. And you can also get a little extra money by registering with Bybit EU. Very important, Bybit EU, not Bybit.com. The whole thing is regulated. You can find the link for this in the video description. Simply deposit $100 and you'll get 20 USDC on top, so 100 USDC in this case within the first 14 days after you register. Additionally, there are further bonuses, up to another $100 on top in this case. If you complete your identification here, deposit at least $50, so you get a double bonus here. First, the 20 USDC with my link, because it's only available through a partner link, in this case, my link. Then, up to another $100 extra if you do a bit of trading here, and you can easily buy Bitcoin Spot and other cryptocurrencies here as well. By now, they have listed quite a few cryptocurrencies here. It's really easy to buy with USDC Spot, for example. Just use your 20 additional USDC to buy Bitcoin. Now, the question is, where does the money come from? Because the US is sitting on massive debt, and there's this interesting post that says, we are taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin repaying our enormous debt of $37 trillion. Record investments in the USA. New plants and factories are being built everywhere. Everyone receives a dividend, that's what he calls it, of at least $2,000. Of course, at least also implies that it might be a bit more. Except for high earners, which is of course great, and this could lead people to invest in Bitcoin again. Because even in 2020, after those stimulus checks, as they were called back then, people invested in Bitcoin. And if you had done that back then, if you had invested those $1,200 in Bitcoin in 2020, you would now have a profit, or rather a figure, of $18,619, which means a gain of 1,452%. And that's exactly what I mean. A lot of people did that back then, and there are even charts about it. If you look at the charts after people did that, Bitcoin rose by 941% in a year. That means these stimulus checks were announced, or rather signed. Then it took a little while until everything was sent out. People first had to, for example, register with Coinbase or Kraken in the US. Everything took a little while, and then the retail market was ignited when people said, all right, let's invest in Bitcoin here. Bitcoin was the new thing, and a year later, after starting at an initial price of around $6,000, it could have been a bit more or a bit less. It then reached about $55,700, somewhere around there, peaking at $57,000 back then. That meant a gain of 941% in 1 year, based on a closed candle after the signing of the CARES Act in this case. That doesn't mean it was after the stimulus check was paid out, but rather after the signing. There were also a few issues there. Robin just made a nice tweet about that. We'll take a look at that in a moment. To be honest, after the payout, things moved pretty quickly. First, the whole thing has to be signed, then it has to be processed, and then it has to be paid out. And now there are the first charts that compare this again, and they are very nice. Specifically in 2020, these so-called COVID-19 payments, as they're called, he referred to them as stimulus checks. Many people still say today that it was a COVID bonus. It was paid out, or rather, it came a bit later. Here's the chart from December 11th, 2020. If you remove me here, December 11th, 2020. That's about when the whole thing was paid out. Many people only received it in January, so maybe a little later. And this is how it could look here here it's October 3rd, but to be honest, it's going to take a little longer. Just for fun, they overlaid the charts a bit here. To be completely honest, it's still going to take a little while. We can wait another month or two until the first payments go out. I also think it'll be around the end of December or the beginning of January again. Maybe a nice Christmas present for US citizens. And here, a chart has been drawn to show what it would look like, percentage-wise, if it happens this way. Here, it's been a bit exaggerated because, as you can see, the chart didn't go up that high. It's been a bit exaggerated. Then there would be a figure of $172,000 here. We can be very curious to see what happens. Of course, all eyes are still on the market, especially regarding the ETFs. We always have to keep in mind that the big money is now heavily involved through the ETFs. That means ETF movements are extremely important here. Of course, the retail market can also move quite a bit, and if so much money suddenly enters circulation, and even if only half or a quarter of it is invested in Bitcoin or perhaps in other cryptocurrencies, that could certainly reignite the retail Bitcoin hype. And we've seen that in every bull run so far. We need the retail market. The big money can play around a bit now, up, down, and so on. They can do all of that, but the market has always really been fueled by retail money. So you and me. The only problem is that we also easily become exit liquidity for the big players. That means we invest and the big players say, the profits are there. Now I'll sell. And then very often we're left holding the bag because we thought it'll go even higher, it'll go even higher. That's why it's always important to take profits and store them safely, and ideally even on your own wallet. Here's a little reminder. Unfortunately, the 60% promotion from Tangem is now over, but there's still 25% off the beautiful ring, which I always wear here, the Tangem ring. And of course, with Tangem, you can get the simple hardware wallet for your smartphone. Super easy. There are plenty of tutorial videos here on the channel if you need one, right here. So you can pick a ring size here with 25% off and grab yours, plus free shipping on top, and always save 10% with the code CryptoUL. But at first there was a bit of confusion about those $2,000. And of course that was interesting because many people didn't know, is it coming or not? Robin summarized the whole thing again and said that the checks are supposed to be financed from customs revenues and given to low and middle income Americans. That means, in other words, people with low and middle incomes will receive these $2,000. At least according to his statement, at least $2,000. First, there was a statement from Scott Bessent who backtracked and said, wait a minute, that's not quite right yet. But then, Trump made it very clear with his next post. The payment comes directly from customs revenues. Supposedly, thanks to this new customs agreement, they have so much revenue that they can pay out this much money here. So it's definitely going to be exciting to see whether this can heat up the Bitcoin retail market and even lead to a new Bitcoin all-time high. $150,000 was always a number that many said was a realistic value for 2025. Now we only have about 1.5 months left, around 40 days remaining in this year. We can be very curious to see if something else will happen. But I do have one more bullish thing, and I've shared this before. There's this bullish chart showing that Bitcoin often went up after it was announced that McDonald's was bringing back the McRib. In the US, that's a product that's not always available. They always do it as a special where they say now the McRib is here, it's available for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you can get it. Whereas in Germany, it's always available. At least, I'm not exactly sure about that. I haven't been to McDonald's in ages. In any case, there's this nice chart that shows the McRib is also an indicator for the next Bitcoin rally. That's not a joke. It's actually very funny. McRib returns, boom, 2018 hype. 2021 driven up again. Yeah, at the end of 2021, the McRib came back too. That time it wasn't so great, but the others, so if you consider that we've already seen the McRib return 4 times here, and only once it wasn't that good, that's a pretty impressive rate. And now it's being said, the McRib is coming back. We should be very curious to see if that will have a positive impact on Bitcoin again. If McDonald's could now introduce Bitcoin payments. Interesting. We can be very curious about what else is coming our way. In any case, I find this news very interesting and actually quite bullish. The only question is, what will US citizens do with it? How are US citizens doing right now? Of course, we have little insight into that. You can't really see whether people are doing well at the moment and if they can actually invest their money in Bitcoin. Or are people doing so badly that they really need the $2,000 for something else? As we know, health insurance is always an issue in the US. If you get sick, job security is also a problem. When you're ill, you could find a termination letter in your mailbox the very next day. Not everything is so easy in the US. That's why it's always difficult to assess the situation. Can this money really be invested in Bitcoin relatively quickly, or are US citizens currently so burned out, so to speak, that that's absolutely not possible? We'll see, but in my opinion, the announcement is very, very positive for now, and of course I'm happy for all US citizens who receive such checks or bonuses. maybe that's something we could consider in Germany as well. No, we need tanks. With that in mind, I want to say thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video.